Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nick Olson, and this is a webinar specifically on departure planning. I will jump into a screen share, and very quickly, today we're really going to be using we have two ways that we can use departure planning, two places, the PredictWind app and website, which is this here, and the offshore app. Today we're really going to just focus on we're going to be using the PredictWind forecast website, which has the same functionality as the PredictWind app, which is what we use when we're on local at home on Wi-Fi connections at the marina sort of thing. Anytime we're going offshore, we use the offshore app, and we can do our departure planning in the offshore app wherever we are in the world. But today we're really just going to focus on using the PredictWind forecast website. Okay, so what is departure planning? It is a tool to help us find our best time to depart. And whilst this graphic here says day 1, day 2, day 3, we can actually bring that right down to hourly intervals. So if we wanted to decide whether it's better to leave in the morning or the afternoon for a short coastal passage, would be the sort of the general scenario where we would do that. We can do that. So we'll have a look at that later. How does it work? It works by using the PredictWind weather routing algorithm, and it's just setting up different start times, and we're comparing all those different start times and looking at the outputs. Yeah, we'll go into the forecast models we can use and when we might use one and not the other as we go through. One of the big things about departure planning, one of the really useful things that the outputs that we get is our wave routing outputs. So this is, our roll, our vertical acceleration, and boat slamming. And that's obviously not something that you've probably had much experience with. And how do we calculate that? Is that we create a 3D model of your boat, and then for the route we use the wind wave, the primary swell, the secondary swell, and the tertiary swell, and we put them all together and see how your boat goes throughout the route and give you outputs. And we will talk a lot about that in our departure planning, because getting your departure right in regard to this wave stuff is critical. So whether you're a yacht or powerboat, powerboat's probably even more critical than a yacht. And we'll look at both of those. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to really look at there. So we will get started. So before we, so departure planning is all about choosing a weather window. And we can go sort of right back to the beginning on that. And generally there'll be, if we're doing longer passages, they're quite seasonal. And so, do we, like for where I am, we in Auckland in New Zealand, we only ever go up to the Pacific in general at the start of our winter. So sort of starting in May, and then we all come back from there in from the Pacific Islands in November before the cyclone season starts. And we have a similar sort of thing if we're in the Caribbean. And so, yeah, that's a consideration that we need to think about in the outset is, our seasonal planning. And we do have some stuff around that in local knowledge, in our local knowledge tool, which is down here, and you can have passages that you can put in there, and it'll give you seasonal data. You can also go and look in your Jimmy Cornell's passage planning, asking groups, but getting that seasonal stuff right at the start sort of puts you in the, that you're going the right way at the right time of the year, to be to go to the places where you should be, and that you're not going into hurricane season or whichever it is, wherever you are in the world. So obviously that's a big planning thing. And before and so we make our plans, and then, we've got our boat all prepared, and ready. And, we have a sort of a time window that we'd like to leave. And then we can start looking at our big picture weather stuff. And we would do this by looking at our wind maps. Ideally, we'd be looking at this well in advance, so over the month beforehand, you might be looking at it, or maybe the year before you're planning it and looking at it, and just looking at how these weather patterns develop over time. And then we might, sort of pencil in a time that we're going to leave and sort of look at these weather patterns and say, okay, well, once that front passes through, or that weather system's gone, we can start looking at our departure planning. And so there's quite a bit around getting that time before we'd even use our departure planner. Obviously, if this is a short-term trip, like this is just a coastal trip, it's a different scenario, and we can just look at the forecast, for today, tomorrow, and see if we think it's good, and then we could run our tool and be aware of a whole lot of other factors that we may not normally think of, and we'll look at that. So you'll see here we have these, we have this front drawn on here, and this low, and this information here. So this is all GMDSS stuff, and again, this is important for our planning our departure, because we can see what the meteorologists are saying about what's happening with the weather at that time. And so if I click on this one here, it says there's a storm, high seas forecast. I click on that, and it gives me the details. And if I scroll down here, this highlighted part is the part of the GMDSS that is relevant to what I saw on the screen there. And so I can take that into account and think about that for my planning. Okay, so let's sort of actually just move on to the tool, because that's really what we're here for. So if I come down here, and we have weather routing and departure planning. So I click on the departure planning. Let's assume that we're happy with a window, and we're ready to go, and we're looking to go in the next 4 days. So come down here, click on this departure planning tool here, and we have sail planning and power planning, and they are different algorithms. And so if you've got a power boat, obviously you need to be using the power one. Sailboat, of course, you're using the sail one. They are not the same algorithms, so don't think they are. And I'll briefly go over each. So I've clicked on sail planning. So before we can do any passage, whether we are a power boat or a sailboat, we really need to look at our polars. And so I'm in sail planning, and then I've clicked on this planning preferences up the top here. And this is going to allow me to set up my polars. Polars are how fast the software expects my boat to go in any given conditions. And then when we do the power, you'll see that it's slightly different. So we'll talk about sail first, and we'll set that up. So we do cover off polars a bit and quite a few other webinars, but we will quickly go through this today. And we'll come back to these forecast models up the top here. So I do need to set this up. So I have got predefined here. I've got that selected. And by predefined, it means that I can choose a boat from this list. There's a huge amount of yachts listed in here. And I can choose one, either my boat or one that's similar to mine, is the best place to start. So I've got a Leopard 50 in there, and that's going to, over here, you can see how fast it thinks I'm going to go, and all the given wind speeds, wind angles, and how fast the boat goes. If I wanted to, I could copy that polar over to the advanced, and I can see, I've just clicked on advanced there, you can see what this polar table looks like, and I could adjust it. And just so you know what these columns and rows are, true wind speed down this column And then for each of these rows, I have a true wind angle and a boat speed. So 8 knots of true wind speed, true wind angle of 45 degrees. My boat speed is 3.97. 14 knots of breeze, 45 degrees, true wind angle, 6.11. Not sure if my Leopard 50 will actually sail at 45, but if I wanted to, I could actually even delete that first row and say, actually, I sail at 52 is as good as I'm going to get out of my cat. And so I've actually just changed my polar, and away I go. If you want to, we have a really, really awesome system that will actually update your polar automatically. You need a data hub to do that, and it's an AI, we call it the AI polar, and it will actually read the data off your boat and adjust your polar to how your boat performs and how you sail your boat. It's a really great system that we have there. So we do have the sail polar, which is a very basic setup, upwind at 50 degrees, 90 degrees, and downwind at 160, all at 15 knots. You can put those numbers in there, and way to go. You can go. It's very basic. Don't recommend it. I'd prefer that you put a bit of time in and set up at least use a predefined, or and then went to advanced and adjusted your polar, or did the AI. A polar speed adjustment, upwind, downwind at night. So that's just 100% is what we see here. 90% would be 90% of what we see here across the board. At night, we have that at 90% because it's harder to sail at night. We might sail more conservatively. Okay, so this is important. This is our wave polar. And so this is what's going to create the basic 3D model of our boat. You'll see here, this is already set up because I clicked on the predefined. If I turn that off, you can't see it, so we need to turn it on. The AI polar and the wave polar are pro subscription features. And to do weather routing itself, you need a standard or a pro sub. So I've got a sail catamaran set here. It's got my displacement, waterline length, beam, and draft. Obviously, we've got a picture of a mono hull here, but displacement, waterline length, hull draft, and beam. So not your keel draft if you've got a mono, or if you've got digger boards. So that's all set up. That's going to create this basic 3D model of my boat. There's actually quite a lot goes on in the background for all of these different models, but we could try and keep it simple on the front end. Depth avoidance. We want to do this so that it uses an ocean contour and will avoid these shallow waters. It's not a nav tool, but it does help us get better routes, better departure plans. And tidal and ocean currents. I've got this set for the Mercator. We can change that for our routing to the HICOM or the RTOFS. And we don't need to worry about the advanced routing adjustments. It's a yacht racing thing. So I wanted to talk about this up here, this forecast model. So because we're doing, I've actually got a short passage set up along the coast. I am going to put the PWG and the PWE on, and I'm going to turn off the Spire and the GFS. The reason I want to put the PWG and the PWE on is because I'm doing a coastal passage, and they will do a better job in that situation up the coast than the global models. And I've got two other very good global models here, UKMO, ECMWF, to compare with. And yeah, so we can choose which models we're actually looking at in our departure planning. Okay, so we're all set up for our polars. There is, polars can be quite complex. So, reach out to our support team if you have more questions about that, or have a look at our tutorials. So I've set my polar up. I can come over here to sail planning. So you'll see this is why I wanted to use those, the PWG and the PWE, because they have high resolution modeling along the coast. If I was going down to the Caribbean, I would have stuck with the global models with the GFS and the UKMO. So this green point here is my start waypoint, and I can come over here and open up this box, and you'll see if I move this round, it changes my lat long. So I could set that point by entering a lat long, or I could click on this little button over here, which would actually, if I was on a GPS enabled device, it would actually take me to where I was. We just need to be careful of that if we're in the marina and we've got lots of land around us, that we're not trapping the router. It will move its start waypoint a little bit to get you out of that. But if you are getting an error around that, that's what it is. You need to move it to open water. And same with our depth. So I'll just come out here in case I've got a depth issue. I can save my courses in here if I want to. You see I've got a bunch of them saved down here. They all mean something to me. But yeah, you can call them whatever you want. So I'll just close that there. And I've got my, just zoom out a little bit. I've got my red destination waypoint down here. And I'll put that in there. I've got my start and my finish. And so, you know, I'm going to come down this piece of coast here, and I want to know, you know, when is the best time to depart. So over here, I can change my departure time. Obviously, I'm in the wrong time zone because I'm in Auckland. I can change that to the local time zone if I wish. And I can also change my start time. And so this is actually pretty critical when we're looking at this. I could say whether I'm looking to start today, tomorrow, or the next day. We can't go super far into the future because we're only using 10 days of forecast modeling. And beyond that, we go into the ECMWF ensemble, which still will give us information, but it's just not as, you know, this is definitely a 0 to 10 day tool is the intention. So we try not to go too far out with it. So yeah, we'll go for now. I've got my departures here, so I can space them anywhere from 24 hours apart to down to 1 hour. And so as I was saying before, do I leave this morning or do I leave tomorrow or, you know, tonight? And so let's leave it at 24. I'll close that and I'll click on calculate. And so we're calculating our route. And at the moment, this is crunching a huge amount of information on our servers. And it's looking at every possible scenario. It's using all those weather models. It's using tidal current models, using ocean current models, and all the atmospheric data that we can. So the highest resolution, yeah, everything we've put in there knows what my boat is, what my polars are. It's got my 3D model of the boat, and so it's calculating those different wave states, and very shortly it'll spit out an output for me, and we're going to get everything from how. Yeah, so I'm too shallow. So one of my points here is too shallow. So why don't I move them and recalculate? Or I could change that depth. I mean, I don't really need 10 meters of water for my cat. Let's go change that. So we'll come down here, 2 meters. Back to sail planning, calculate. So everything that I put in there before is the same. And it's only the stuff that I've changed that's going to be recalculated. And I think you'll see now that we all of our routes will calculate. So those ones, obviously, where the router wanted us to go, it couldn't find a way through those through that shallow water. So I can look at these. I can flick through the different models and you know, see what the projected routes for each day. And quite interestingly, looking at all of these, they all look somewhat similar. And we can just have a look and say, yeah, that first one makes us go out to sea. The others appear to each day we're up the coast. Okay, so we can look at this. This is great, and we should. But really, the actual real tool that we want to look at here is our tables. And so if I come in here, I've clicked on that tables button, and I have got my passage time. So whether I left this morning at 9:21, tomorrow, the next day, and the next day, and I've got all these combined outputs for each day. So what I mean by that is, yes, it says here, these results are an average of all 4 weather models. So that was the 4 weather models I chose. It's averaged them out. If I want to see each individual one, I can. And you'll see that's a much more complex looking sort of table. But we can, if we want to, we can come and look at this. Depends on your preference. I think that for choosing our departure time, we're almost better off with the average. And because after we've done chosen which day we think might be the best, we would then go and run our weather routing with that start time. So we don't necessarily, which will give us 6 weather routes. So we don't necessarily need to get too bogged down in the detailed tables there. So what does all this information mean? So we've got our passage time. It's pretty self-explanatory. Motoring, I didn't have any motoring settings turned on. So I can actually turn on a motoring setting. But because we're departure planning, sometimes it's nice to have that off so that we can actually just see, okay, I want to go sailing because I'm on my sailboat here. And so I don't necessarily want to have that skewed by it just giving me a whole trip of motoring. Maximum wind speed that we'll experience throughout the route. This one here, 37 knots. That's probably something we want to be aware of. Minimum wind speed, average wind speed, a maximum gust, 57 knots. So, day 2 is probably not looking all that good. That's very high. And I wonder if we're going to have some weather where we've had 57 knots, whether these days afterwards, is that going to leave some sort of sea state behind as well? Cape, rain, and this here is also nice for us to look at for our passages. And you'll see here time upwind. So 68, 63, 42, 8. Okay, so this day 4 sort of stands out because I'm in a catamaran. I don't really want to sail upwind, but I quite like reaching 92% of the time reaching. So that could be nice. Our wind speeds, the amount of time we're going to be in these different brackets, 8 to 20 knots. We can see here, this one here does have some time in this 30 to 40. But our sort of already appearing to be favorite day is 12% of the time, well 85% of the time we're in that 8 to 20 knots. Time upwind under 15 knots, and we've got no time where we have wind against current, so that's good. And so that will only register if the wind speed is greater than 12 knots. Okay, so, and this is the start of our wave stuff. So see here again, that day 2, we have a percentage of time in 3 to 4 meter. This is combined wind wave and swell. So it looks pretty nasty. And again, now day 4, we've got 96% of the time less than 1 meter. So this is where we start looking at our wave routing outputs. This is really a really big deal for looking at our passages. And so yeah, roll. So that's our boat roll, and it says 4-degree roll, right? So that's less than 4 degrees. RMS, so root mean square. So I know that your boat rolls more than 4 degrees. This is the root mean square. We don't need to worry too much about what that is. It's just a measure that that we use for roll, and this is actually what we want to be looking at down here, is the time in more than 4 degrees. So our threshold is that 4 degrees RMS. And if we're higher than that, we might want to look at whether that's a passage that we would want to take. And, funnily enough, that day 2, 20% of the time we've got, we're above the threshold. Day 3, day 4, fine. Even day 1, it only has 1% of the time. But these ones here are probably a bit more telling. This is vertical acceleration. So this is your movement up and down. And you'll see here we've got above 0.2 degrees G, or 0.2 Gs, not degrees, G. So that's our vertical acceleration. If we're above 0.2, it's giving us this warning here. So, 37, 73, 58, 0. So again, it's, day 4 is looking like the champ. Boat slamming, so that's us chopping wood into the waves, over waves. And on any of those days, we don't have any of that, so that's good. But really, these other days here, they discount us from wanting to do that. Like this vertical acceleration, it would not be pleasant. But by looking at all of this, I would actually go away now and think, okay, I want to get the boat down the coast there. I would start looking at this date here, the 14th of April, because everything in there looks somewhat feasible, and it could be a good departure. What I could do is I could actually now look at come over to my detailed, and I could actually just focus on that day, and again go through all these parameters for the different models on that day, and have a better look at it. But really what I would do now is I would actually go and run weather routing for this date and this time. Okay, so I'll come back to the map, and let's just have a quick look at departure 4 in here. There he goes, and he just reaches down the coast, doesn't he? I can see why it's not why it's not a bad trip, but he does sort of only just get in time before that stuff comes on the nose. So that might be something that we'd want to look at in our weather routing, and keep following that. We might actually want to leave earlier that day. So yeah, and we could go and look at that. Let's come down here to our powerboat routing and have a quick look at that. We'll run the same route, and then we'll go back and we'll run a longer route, as if we're doing an ocean passage. So power planning preferences. So again, we can select these models, but you'll see here these inputs that we've got to put in are completely different. And so the algorithm for hang on, I'm just going to get this right. The algorithm for the powerboat settings is actually going to look at the windage. It's still going to look at the wave effects, but it's also going to give you fuel consumption. It will optimize for fuel, but we also get all of those wave outputs, which is really important. Obviously, we don't need the wind because we're powerboating, but we do want to know what the wind and the wave are doing, because they can affect the motion of our boat. So we can click on this. You'll see here it'll give us all the same sort of specs that we want to look at. And you'll see here there is no predefined list if we're doing powerboating. So we do need to put these parameters in. You know, what's the height from the waterline to top of the wheelhouse, our cruising speed, the RPM, and the fuel consumption, litres per hour we've got there. And then we want to know the displacement. So, you know, let's say she's a bit heavier than that, 15.8 tons. Let's go. She's probably 20. 13.3 meters, 7.4 meter beam. It's a big boat. And our draft of 1.2 meters. So we set that up, and we can come down here, and again we have our depth avoidance, and again we can choose the tidal and ocean currents. Yep. Any questions about power planning? Just you know, polars, reach out to our support team, or we do have a nice tutorial on it. So I've set that up, and again I could change my start time and my you know, my route and that, but let's just keep it the same. And I'll just come over here and calculate. And so again, it's going to look at all the wind, the currents, and it knows, you know, how big my boat is, how heavy it is. It's created that 3D model of the boat, and now it's giving me these outputs. So as you can see, it's, you know, the routes themselves are, you know, pretty much just, you know, A to B, which is what we mostly expect, unless we're doing a really big passage, or we're going into a lot of current, and it will use the current to optimize for us. But we want to come in and look at these tables. I mean, we would also, if it were me, if we're powerboating, you know, depending on what our boat is, whether we want to even just look at some of these for, you know, whether it's on the nose or on the beam, the wind. And that's something that we might want to note, but I suspect that we will see the differences in our outputs. So let's come up here to tables and have a look at our departure planning outputs. Someone's trying to ring me. So same as before, we have our passage time. You know, we're doing 8 knots, and it's going to take, you know, a bit over half a day. But here we have our fuel consumption. So most of the days are pretty similar. That again, that departure 2 is not quite so not quite so good. We use more fuel, but we have our same wind speed stuff there, and the time heading into the wind. So in this case, I would think the time into the wind is a good thing. Time on the beam, possibly a bad thing. Depends. Let's see once we get further down, but we may not want that time on the beam. So yeah, and running, you know, following sea, depending on your boat, may or may not be a good thing. Your wind speeds, ideally for this, we'd be looking at lightest wind speeds possible. You know, if we had the lighter winds, maybe this time on the beam isn't such a big deal. So yeah, let's look at our wave stuff. Again, we can see our combined wind wave and swell here, and then this is our roll. So interestingly, our you know, this is quite different to our sail planning as to what we would be looking at. So this day 1, we've got, like, leaving right now, we've got no time over 4 degrees roll. We've got no time where we're above 0.2 G of vertical acceleration, and no boat slamming. Whereas this day here, you know, where we know we're more on the beam, we do have higher roll, and these two look horrendous. So yeah, we definitely wouldn't want to do these two. And I kind of think that, you know, just knowing that wind is on the beam, I wouldn't necessarily think that our day 4, which was our best sailing day, would be the day to go. I think that we'd probably want to look at going now, and you know, that would be the route we would look at. So again, we could come across and look at the detailed view, and you know, look at day 1 and have a you know, a closer look at it. And you see here, if we look at the models, you know, there is a little bit more time. You know, one of these models thinks there's going to be some time with the wind on the beam, but generally we still look pretty good on this day 1. So we could go and run a weather route for that time, and have a look at it, and which is what we would do. So just super quickly, you know, so we can use this. You know, I could come in here and we'll just go through a couple more scenarios. So let's say we were going to leave on that now. We were thinking, okay, so today's good. We could actually come in here and see if it's better whether we left now or whether we left in 4 hours time or 2 hours time. And, you know, is there any significant difference? Doesn't really look that way to me. You know, yeah. So, but there are times when it could make a big difference for your coastal passage. So let's go to the map. And I do have a big route set here. We'll go to 24 hours. So let's assume that we're heading from the Caribbean back to the US. So I've got my green start waypoint there, my red destination waypoint there. And so I can use this tool to help me work out when a good time to leave is. Obviously, on a bigger passage, there's a whole lot of different things that we need to consider, you know, that we may need to adjust our route during the passage. That's what the weather routing is for. And we would, I'll just start calculating that while I'm talking. We would, you know, potentially adjust our course, you know, during the passage as to where we're going to go, whether we're going to avoid certain things, whether we're going to slow down, hove to, you know, that sort of thing. So we're still in the powerboat routing. I could actually run this sail routing as well, but we're running out of time, so I'll just quickly look at the outputs for this. So again, we have all these same outputs: our passage time, our maximum wind speed, maximum gust, and all that, you know, the amount of time upwind, downwind, reaching, and you see here they've all got some time upwind. That's not surprising for such a big passage, but really we want to come down here and have a look at our wave routing. And you know, this doesn't look like this window doesn't look like it would be particularly nice from this roll point of view. We might want to go away and have a look at that. I mean, that might be something we just have to deal with in our powerboat, or we might be better to do some island hopping and make our way up the coast, break it up into smaller passages, and because we don't have a lot of vertical acceleration or boat slamming, we have none basically, or there's some vertical acceleration here, but we do have a lot of time on the beam, and so that's probably what's causing all the roll, but the different wave states associated with that could be causing it as well. If I did the same route in sail planning, we get a very, very different looking route, and we'll get very different looking outputs. So we'll quickly look at that, and then I will wrap up. So once again, it knows what all my planning preferences are that I set up before for my Leopard 50, and it's going to give me all of those same outputs that we looked at before, and we're just doing it for a much, much longer route. And this I've seen this used very effectively many times for longer passages. especially rallies, getting those departure times right can be, critical. And this is the difference between having a really nice passage and a passage where, people get seasick, or it's dangerous. And so you can actually use this to pick these weather windows, where you, um, you know, leave at the right time. So let's have a quickly look at our tables. So it's a 6-day passage. I probably should have turned the motoring on for this one because, ideally we would, if, we're cruising, we would want to motor if we're in no wind, so there's some minimum wind speeds here around, very light wind speeds. And so there's possibly some time there that we would want to be motoring. Time upwind, that's all pretty good, right? We're happy to go reaching and running. And the wind speeds doesn't look like there's anything too extreme. And, we get a bit more time in the 3 to 4 meter, but we're sailing across the ocean. That's not unexpected. And you'll see here, this little one here, time missing wave data. And so what that means is that some of the time, if we left on this day 4, we don't actually have the wave data for the last day, or some of the last day. So yeah, so we leave on day 1, we get quite a lot of roll. We leave on day 4, we get a lot less. We leave on day 1, 26% of the time we're in 0.2 over 0.2 G of vertical acceleration. Leave on day 4, none. No boat slamming. And we see this one here, I didn't mention this before, but this is the waves influencing the polar. So this is whether the polar is speeding up or slowing you down. The waves are speeding up or slowing you down. And so that just showing that influence on your boat speed. So yeah, once again, we'd probably come in here and we would run our weather routing for this day 4 because it looks like the best day. And we could actually look at the detailed as we did before, but I would go away, run the weather routing for the 14th, and then keep running it each day until we were happy with our departure. And we may run our departure planning again, and closer to that time, and be like, oh well, we could actually leave today, or we could leave, we could leave at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it just gets us ahead of that system, that sort of thing. So, but next steps would be go run weather routing for that time. So you'd come into weather routing, set your start time for the 14th, and start looking at it. So we're not going to do that because we have done webinars on weather routing. We did one a couple of weeks ago, which Kieran can link for you. I will stop sharing my screen and we will wrap it up there. Thank you very much for joining us, and yeah, keep safe and happy departure planning.